This is the Spritz Girl Mindset Podcast, and I'm your host, Courtney Young. If girlhood is a mindset, this is where we practice it out loud and unfiltered. We're healing, we're yapping, and we're doing it with spritzes in hand. Here's your permission slip to be soft, messy, and magnetic as hell. So grab a spritz, grab a seat, no small talk, just the real stuff. All right, and welcome so much to the podcast, Rev Nhien. How are you doing today?
Doing great, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
I am so excited to have this conversation with you. I feel like we've had this kind of in the backlog for a while now, and I'm just so thrilled for the opportunity to get to know you and your story better. So thank you so much for making the time to come and talk to my audience. I do want to kind of just start with one of my main pillars on this podcast is this idea of girlhood and your origin story. You were born in Vietnam, fled as a political refugee. You became a Stanford trained lawyer, and now you're a unity minister. That is the story of radical reinvention. Can you kind of walk me and my audience through that path for me?
Yeah, wow. I mean, how far back do I go? I guess since you mentioned like girlhood, if you will, what's really interesting is that, so I was born during war. I was born during the Vietnam War. We fled and became political refugees, and I grew up in Southern California. And what's interesting is I grew up in a house with 3 sisters and 1 brother. So he was outnumbered, lots of girls in our family. But I wasn't expecting to share this, but since I was supposed to be a boy, according to my mom. And I think that, like, having heard this, like, they do these predictions and thought I was going to be a boy. So there's this piece, was I a mistake? I think it was like the beginning of my life. Like, am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? Do I even belong here? It was basically like how I entered this world. And even hearing my own mother, who's so loving in so many ways. But there are certain things where she just blurts out things like, yeah, you were supposed to be a boy. And yes, you came out dark when like in our culture, like being fair skinned is better, right? And so there are all these ways I felt deeply rejected early on. The Enneagram, my book, I talk a bit about that early journey and how contemplative Enneagram work has served to really heal that within myself. That piece of reinvention is, so I became a lawyer, realizing that, like, even so in an Asian family, you become a doctor. So lawyer's like number 2. It's not like the best, but I sucked in science and math, and I was always good in like English, and logic. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just take second best. So Stanford Law, second best. So happy. And it really wasn't my path. And only when I started to wake up did I go, shoot, now I'm stuck in this job. It felt like I was stuck, and my student loans were massive, and I just didn't know what to do. But in this spiritual awakening that I had an awakening like spiritually, and I realized, oh, this is it. This is the thing that I've wanted my whole life. And now I was clear, like, this is what I want to give to people, because this inner healing, the sense of belonging, the sense of wholeness that started to happen within me was like, this is it. I've always wanted to be of service to the world, and I just didn't know how. Like, I didn't have clarity on that. So that was the basis of this like call to ministry, and to leave my law job behind and take a venture, in this new path where there was nobody to guide me. No one in my family had ever done anything like it before. And most of them were convinced that this was because they were really practical in my family, and yet I did it anyway. And I will like I'm so fulfilled. I love my work, and I would never turn back. Like, it's amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, I have goosebumps, but that is such an incredible story. I actually feel like in a lot of ways, our stories are very, I'm kind of following in similar footsteps. I didn't do the whole college thing. That wasn't for me personally, but I have worked in all kinds of different fields. I now am fortunate enough to be a salon manager, but the thing I've always been the most passionate about is helping people, being there for people, encouraging them to come into their full selves. That's what led me to start this podcast. I actually did work in the church for a little while as well as a director of student ministries in the Methodist Church. So I really resonate with so much of what you shared. And it's such an important pillar to me on this podcast that we lean into this idea of authentic storytelling, right? So, this idea that our story isn't necessarily linear and that reinvention is a part of claiming your identity.
Yeah, beautiful. I love hearing your connection to, some of us, it's almost like archetypally it feels that some of us are simply called to this journey of drawing forth others' potential.
Yeah.
Like there's something about that is so juicy for me.
Yes.
Like that thing you named it as like you're like people show up in different jobs, whether it's like student like counseling jobs, or ministry, whatever it is, this sort of drawing out of this authentic selfhood that lies often dormant within another person, right? That's very juicy for me.
I love the Enneagram
So,
and the way it just gives us so much language to connecting to our
mm,
own stories, to helping us identify these patterns. And when we think of that idea of like reinvention, like taking ownership of your story, finding who you are, like I don't think people realize what a powerful tool the Enneagram actually is for that specifically.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And related to that, I guess we never even mentioned the title of my book, The Enneagram of the Soul. Part of the point of the book is this idea that so we want to transcend the limitations of our personality type, but at the same time is not bad, meaning it's not like you're trying to discard it. In fact, recognizing type is a part of how I believe we recognize our soul's calling, you know, like our true calling through the gifts that are natural to us within our particular type structure. So even though we transcend the limitations of the type, we still use to this like greater potentiality, what I might call soul or just true self.
That
Yeah.
actually translates perfectly to what I was going to start to ask you about next, which is this idea that you are not your Enneagram type. So many of us we cling to our type like it's our zodiac sign, I hear a lot of people who go on social media and want to start with the Enneagram comparing it to Myers-Briggs or comparing it to zodiac, and those are like great in their own merit, but they're completely different. And your book says that we are not our type. And you were kind of touching on that with the idea of so, can you just like explain a little bit better to my audience, like what you mean by that and why the Enneagram is such a powerful tool that differs from some of these other things?
Yes, yes, I would love to do that. So I often like to focus not on like discerning type first, but looking at the circle of the Enneagram, because the circle itself can just remind us that we are this dynamic whole. Meditate on the circle. It's like you are not limited to one point on that circle. Like you have this infinite capacity and potentiality within our like this all the gifts of humanity within us, right? Each of us. And if you look at the Enneagram, it's a circle where I see all the points called the personality types on the circumference. So I see it as like we tend to over identify with our personality and think this is me. And so we get stuck on just this one little point on the circumference wholeness, and then through this contemplative or like meditative Enneagram work, inner work, we sort of awaken to like if you're a two, you learn that you can say no and you can assert yourself in the
Yeah.
world and you can get your needs met and have your personal goals, not just helping someone else's goals. You learn to go bigger than like what your type is like, no, 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 can't do that. That's selfish or self-centered. So just things like that. That's just one example of how first we identify the type as helping us to identify actually this is the little prison that you live in and you don't even know you live in it,
Right.
and prison could be extreme. We can call it a box, right? So when people say, I think what you're speaking to is that as much as I write this in my book, as much as we don't like other people putting us in boxes, some of us, we actually put ourselves in boxes. It's
Yes.
like, oh, I am this way. That's it, right? We're like the cats that go, okay, I'm going to play with this box and I'm going to hang out here, and just like cat in the box, and not realize that like there's a bigger gift actually. The box
This
wasn't
actually
the
makes
box
me
was to offer.
This actually
Oh,
makes me think of a close friend of mine who was kind of struggling with her own typing journey. And she went so back and forth on, so she was stuck between a 5 and a 6, right? And one of the things that she had said to me was, I think I see myself in the ideal version of a type 5, but like the fear, like some of the things like I see about myself as a 6, like I care about safety, so, like, maybe I'm that, but then when she started to do that internal work and really dig deeper into, like, no, 5s look at their energy reserves. It really matters to them, like, this idea of, not having these obligations placed upon them and really wanting this privacy, and love does require energy, and how do we, like, connect that? How do we lean into that? She started to be like, well, the only reason that I thought I was a 6 is because I was so concerned about like this anxiety and this need for safety. And my question to her was, who says that 5s can't be concerned about safety? Who says that 5s can't be anxious?
most right. Right. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what you're speaking to is also in my book, I talk about the difference between labeling or discovering type based on behavioral descriptions versus motivation, which is actually the core of a type.
Yeah.
So it's not what, but why, right? So like there's some pieces around, oh, I worry, therefore, like, oh, it's like, well, what do you worry about? Twos worry, but they worry in the relational field, whereas sixes worry as a generalized side, and so and partly because the world in general, like there isn't a ground of being within them. So there's a deeper sort of almost existential issue that the worry is touching in on, that we know in sixes. Yeah. So yes. And I want to add to this conversation that it's tricky because I hear people funny, often in the head types who go back and forth or deliberate for years, about their number, never landing. And that becomes what they worship in a way, right? It becomes the idol of like figuring out my number versus awakening from,
Yes.
just trying to name like my self-awareness. What am I showing up with in this moment? Is this of service to my highest self? And if it's not, I can look at it, right? Like, and so for some people, I do recommend set the Enneagram down for a moment, like
That is-
you're like put the map down and just sense into the territory of your lived experience
yes.
for a moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because again, I so deeply identify with that. I love everything that you're saying. For me in my own typing journey, for years, I used to host an Enneagram podcast. Specifically, I'm very passionate about the Enneagram, but I thought I was a 2 for a super long time. And then I had the incredible opportunity to get to chat with Beatrice Chestnut and Urania Paez, and we really got into what that actually looks like. And for me, I never really fully identified with the idea of rejection because people can decide they don't like me and that doesn't bother me. I'm like, that's fine. That's not whatever. But
Mhm.
abandonment and this idea that somebody that I let into my inner circle deciding they don't want to be around anymore and saying peace out,
Mhm.
that really struck a chord with me. And so I think that speaks so deeply to what you're saying is a lot of these things can be so similar, like rejection and abandonment. I feel like on the feelings wheel sit right next to each other. And if
Right.
you aren't self aware enough to do that work and to
Mhm.
really look at your motivation behind what you're doing, because you're so right, it is the why, not the what. And we look at Enneagram, Instagram, we look at a lot of these things and we get so caught up on that easy to understand chat GPT behavior list and
Mhm.
not the actual motivation behind what we're doing. And I love that you said put it down and really self evaluate and do the work because your lived experience, your story, those things are going to help you find those things. And if you're not willing to do the work, then what are you using the Enneagram for?
Yes, yes, beautiful. Yeah. And related to it, sometimes I think good coaches, I believe, or mentors who work with the Enneagram sometimes make the Enneagram implicit rather than explicit for this reason, right? So that people don't overly focus on it. But my knowing it can help me to frame what might be happening for this person now. Right. But if we try to label it too quickly, we could shut it into a box that it doesn't really belong in. So there's a lot. I think newer Enneagram teachers are like, oh, everything's Enneagram, and then after a while, you're like, oh, it's no, like
Right.
traverse the territory. And then, like, will the map be helpful? If you're not lost, don't even look at the map because the map could get you, you
Yeah.
could trip over your feet if you're staring at the map while you're walking. So,
Yeah, and there's so much to it too. I always tell my clients who are in my group coaching, look at look at the motivations first. Look at the motivations and the fears first. The wings, the tri types, the like integration arrows, those are all great, but you have to be willing to look at your own story,
uh,
own motivations before any of that makes any sense, right?
yeah.
It's not going to make sense if you can't understand the basics of it. And you can't understand the basics of it if you don't start to do the work to understand your own story.
Yes. If you can't self-observe, right? You're speaking
Absolutely.
to that. Yeah.
So, talk to me about Enneagram and soul work. How does that help us move through our patterns rather than identify with them?
Yeah. So definitely first identifying the personality, as I talk in the book. And this is not my language, it's Drew Moser who basically called the type as the trailhead,
Mhm.
into the wilderness of the self. And I love that. And when I think about the self, I think, okay, well, of course, not everybody has to, but I happen to work from a spiritual perspective. So
Mhm.
I think of the self as this like divine, your divine nature, your true nature. And there's this fullness and this dynamism of being that is available to us. And but it's like a wilderness in that those are non-domesticated parts of me. They're parts of me that maybe don't belong in my current relationships or lives, like that don't rest well with the way I've constructed my life, right? Like for the a three like me, maybe it's like aspects of like laziness that I'm like, that is not me. It's just like we don't even go there. We do not rest, again, historically. And so this idea of soul work is like entering into that wilderness, being willing to unknow even who you are. This journey of doing the work to like unravel selfhood and die to who we even think we are and allow a space where this inner wisdom starts to inform us, starts to like have some heft in our lives, something within ourselves, not a response to the world, not, but something deep within starts to emerge. I love that. There's a famous author, educator, Parker Palmer, who
Mhm.
wrote, "The soul is shy. The soul is
Mhm.
shy." It's like you don't go prancing into the woods. You sit quietly at the edge. It's like if you want that deer to come out, you wait quietly at the edge. And so there's the sense of bringing a sense of quiet, of silence,
Right.
of stillness to the path to allow for something that's maybe not as noisy as my everyday ego to
Yeah.
emerge and have voice and have space. And that to me is the emergence of like the fullness of soul.
Mm,
Uh,
love that. And for me, I'm a very extroverted, loud, life of the party. And I've always struggled with this idea about sitting in stillness and meditation and taking that space. Like that is something that for me, that nervous system regulation has been something I've been actively trying to work on and something that I'm working on, with my clients. What would you say to people who do struggle with that? Where do you start with that work? How do you really like start to emerge into that soul as you were kind of describing it?
what a great question. So I don't know if there's anyone for whom that's beginning to be silent and still is easy. So I just wanted to say it's hard for everybody. And I know that when I was, all I did was cry for the first few meditations, just like for like, the first year. So, but I think that for people who are especially active, it might be helpful to begin with more like mindfulness. Begin with moving, but you're paying attention to yourself as you're
Right.
moving. Like if you're walking, you're not just walking to get there, you're noticing the texture of the ground beneath your feet. You're really sensing into that present moment. And that begins to awaken us, I believe, to what is actually happening. We talked earlier about this inner observer, right? And of being able to really self-observe. Well, another section of my book, I try to illuminate something that I don't know that most of the population really talks about, which
Yeah.
is a lot of times people talk about being self-reflective. So they're introspective, and so they think they're self-aware.
Mhm.
And so I'm making a distinction between being self-reflective, which is, shoot, I just yelled at my partner. I know why I yelled. I'm so good at analyzing why I yelled and understanding myself. Okay, so that's important, right? Self-reflection after the fact is
Right.
important,
Of
but
course.
may not stop me from yelling again. I mean, this is not autobiographical, just kidding. Just kidding. But I'm just saying, you know, but self-observation in the moment, if I am versed, I will catch that heat
Mhm.
coming out because for me, true self-observation is present moment.
Right.
It's actually happening in the present moment. So we can cultivate it first through like that somatic mindfulness practice. But then eventually, I say when it comes to silence and stillness, don't shoot, I recommend 20 minutes. Don't shoot for 20 minutes if you're new, go for
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
5 can feel like forever, and 5 can feel like, especially when people who wanna be good are used to being good at things. They're like, "5 minutes? I suck at meditation, yeah," and they're like, "I suck." I'm like, "Yeah, most of us do." I like so but, like, keep it up, right? And
Right.
so also trusting that if you sat for 5 minutes and you feel like it was useless because all you did was think, I see it as a win. I see it as, like, the angels are rooting for you and you sat. The primary spiritual practice that I recommend is not one of actually being able to harness attention, but it's a practice of intention. So it's almost like your intention, your willingness to sit there for 5 minutes, however badly it goes. Like to me, it's the heart's intention to say, I want to wake up. I
Wow.
want to know.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So my tagline and one of the things I talk about with my clients is, we spiral with purpose, right? We take ownership of
Mhm.
our stories. We share our stories. That means the messy middle. That means leaning into those moments that are hard. And I love that you just like leaned into maybe you don't, maybe you're not the best meditator in the whole world because who is, but like you sat and that is a win and that is a step in the right direction. And for me, that really speaks to my own language, this idea that, yeah, we all spiral, we all have our moments, we all lash out at our partners sometimes, we all, fill in the blank with what it is for you. But when we spiral with purpose, when we can take that time to really reflect, not just after the fact, before the fact, sit with our stories, share our stories, vocalize our stories, that changes everything. And it makes that spiral a part of you rather than something external that you're trying not to control.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I love how you just described that because it speaks to the core of the way I approach contemplative Enneagram, like inner work, which is compassion based.
Mhm.
This idea that everything belongs,
Yes.
right? Like we're not casting out aspects of our being. We're trusting that by embracing them and welcoming them, they naturally transmute and transform. When we try to push them away, make them different. We're rejecting parts of ourselves. And so it's like the anti love, it's not the compassionate embrace. And so most of us, I mean, I know I personally didn't trust that. When I first began my journey, I really believed, I was like, we shouldn't go down here, everybody. It's like, it's ugly down here. I was like, there's so much anger and there's so much hurt down here. Are you sure you want me to go inside me? Because,
Yeah.
I can behave, but like in the inside, I'm filled with like resentment and hurt and all this. And I remember there were just people who's like, just kind of rooted me on and say, like, we trust that there's something good in you, Yin, that you are good. I was like, are you sure? Because, I really was like, are you sure? I don't know if I want to let this out. And in the beginning, when I meditated, it was, oh, there's all the anger. There's all the muck. There's all. And then eventually there came a time when like one day I literally it felt like light inside of me. Like, oh, that's what people are talking about. It's underneath all that muck. It's
Yeah.
not somewhere out there to look light. It's like in me, but I had to like be willing to let all this like the best analogy comes from Taoism. You could tell how interspiritual I am. I'm
I love
jumping around
that.
from different like but like this idea that like here's my consciousness and I've got this glass of water but like if it's at the bottom of the glass, right? Like it's filled with silt. But while I'm still and I haven't like done anything, I'm not praying, I'm not doing anything, I'm fine. I
Right.
just The dirt's at the bottom. You guys all see the clear stuff. It's good. As soon as I start meditating, praying, it's like whooshing clear water in. And then the first thing that happens is, oh my God, the whole glass is dirty now. I'm like, I feel like a wreck. We should go back. We should go back to the clean glass. Stop pouring the water in, you know? And so for me, meditation and prayer is like adding that water. I was like, no, 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 just keep adding it. And eventually it clears out, you
Wow.
know? And it's like, then you have those lucid moments of where, oh, I am love. I am beloved. I am whole. There is a ground of being, all these beautiful things that like we can experience when we go through our human experience
Right.
of muck and guck,
I
right?
always say the way out is
Yes.
through. You can't get to the other
Yes.
side by avoiding. It's not possible. You have to be willing to face it. And when we talk about this idea of anger, when we talk about this idea of resentment or those feelings that so many people identify as like quote unquote negative, like sure, they feel bad, but that doesn't mean that those feelings aren't an essential part of the human experience. They are an essential part of who you are. And you have to give yourself the space to sit and play with those feelings to really understand what's underneath them.
Mhm.
I love that you said that because that is absolutely so true. And I think it ties back to this idea of, again, your story matters. It's important. It has healing power. It is bigger than you realize it is, and you have to be willing to take ownership of that. You know, every time we pretend, oh, it's fine when it's not fine. Every time we self-minimize, we're hurting ourselves and we're not being honest with ourselves. And if we aren't being honest with ourselves, how are we supposed to be living a fulfilled life?
Right, right. One of the most beautiful aspects of, I think, our modern culture that's emerged is the focus on authenticity. And that's recognition, and authenticity being like what you're saying, which is not a, hey, there's certain parts of us that are unacceptable. We're just going to keep those hidden, sometimes even to ourselves. But like authenticity as a way of embracing all that is actually there and true within me, and what happens when that happens. Can I trust that? And it so happens my spiritual foundation in unity, I believe that we're all made, like we are all innately whole. And
Yeah.
so it's like a trust there that, oh yeah, that seems pretty flawed and broken. Yeah, you know, but like trust me, you know, like there's an underlying wholeness as a foundation. And then to your point, even adding on that, like to me, negative emotions used to be a bad thing for me. Now it's like, wow, sadness colors our existence.
Yes. Yes.
It's Yeah, right? It's an aspect. I get to feel this. I'm alive and I get to feel this aspect of being alive. And this is what it is to be human. My relationship to my own like jagged humanity has changed so much as a result of this journey, both from the knowledge of the Enneagram, but also the mixing of it with like pres- presence, you know? Yeah.
I love that. When I worked in the church, pastor I used to work with, his name is Chris. He would always talk about this idea of, you know, for Christians, so many of us when we go and pray and when we go to God in prayer, do we really think that God doesn't see, hear, feel our anger? So if we want to claim that we believe in God, why would we, just pretend that everything is fine? Like if God is the one who said he was the savior of the world and he was the father. So as the child, if we want to have an honest relationship with the creator, we should be able to bang our fists on his chest and trust that we're safe and trust that we're whole and trust that that is a part of the process because again, the way out is through. So I love that you shared that. I feel like where you're zigging, I'm zagging and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you described that. And kind of to bring it back to like a Christian framework, I love this idea that, well, maybe I'll blend it in with a little bit of like 12-step models. Like we are as
I love
sick
it.
as the secrets that we keep.
Yep.
This- And if you think about this idea that like the divine or God like can't force us to open ourselves, right? That's free will. And so anything we hoard as a secret, anything that we try, it's not like it's not known by the divine, it's not known by God, but that what we keep from healing.
Yeah.
We from love,
Yeah.
actually. And so the fact that like we hold it back from the healing power of love itself, you know, for fear of the shame that we might have of bringing it forth, not recognizing how unconditional that love truly is, you know, and really surrendering the things that we believe are the most shameful things about ourselves. And it's funny because for many of us, for many types, it is the negative feelings, but sometimes for fours that I work with, it's the joy
Yeah,
that they repress, that's
absolutely.
forbidden, you know? It will make me not me. If it's like make me not authentic, maybe not, and as understanding that they only have half of the coin, one side of the coin, that this aspect of them, they're actually their ego is actually pushing away and not allowing the existence of this thing that is true within them, right? And so whatever that shadow part is, allowing it to be exposed and to be open first to ourselves by admitting it, right? And then to the God of our understanding.
I often say with my clients, like, your ego gets in your way so many times because we let it get in our own way. We're unwilling to do that work. We're unwilling to be honest with ourselves. And that why? Is it because we don't want to be hurt? Is it because we don't want to feel sad? Like what is it that we're protecting? And the longer you continue to try and protect that, further away from that healing, from that joy, from that authenticity that you speak so freely of, that we push that away. And if we would just lean in a little bit, we could take even the smallest step, right? Because again, just like with meditation, you try something for the first time, it's going to be clunky. You can't expect to be perfect at it or take like a huge step and be like fully healed. That's not how this works. I love that you use the 12
Right.
steps as like a comparison as well, because literally this idea that you can just do one small thing. It doesn't have to be the biggest yes in the world. You can take one small step. And that one small step is a huge win because it brings you closer to truly understanding yourself instead of understanding your ego. So I love that you shared that. And I'm just loving everything that you're sharing with us so much. I'm so excited for my audience to get their hands on your book. Can you talk just a little bit about that? I know it's your passion project, and I really want to give you the opportunity to share about it.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Well, it's called the Enneagram of the Soul, a 40-day spiritual companion for the 9 types. And, you know, there's so many elements I want to bring forth here. One is the spiritual companion part
Yeah.
is really this idea that only should we not do it alone, that we cannot, we're not meant to. So like it's not so noble to be like, I'll do it myself, my own journey. Part of it is that there are things we can't really see about ourselves without having it mirrored. And the spiritual companion language actually comes from this idea of what we call the soul friend. And that comes from the Celtic tradition. So I came across this term that I fell in love with, anamkara, and from John O'Donohue, this Irish Celtic poet philosopher, and it means soul friend. And you know, you as a coach, in a way, what you're talking about is like this friendship to offer someone to walk the journey with them, to support them on their journey. And like good friends, to name something honestly about themselves. So I have these 40 activations in the book, and like you know, once you discern your number, you read your activation. And sometimes it's not pretty what I say about it. You know, sometimes it's like, ooh, I just called out, right? So that's what I mean by like, but hopefully you can feel lovingly called out to help you see something that maybe if you're just wandering around, you're not going to notice about yourself. But if you trust in someone, a coach, like a book companion, then you'll be like, okay, I do that.
Yeah.
That I do default in that way, and so I can kind of look at how that's showing up this day or this week, depending on whether you do it as a 40-day thing or some people do it as a 40-week
Mhm.
companion, right? So that aspect. So how does the you know, so the Enneagram piece is there to say, hey, you know, I'm not here to give you the whole picture of who you are, but here are little tidbits, just enough for the day to be like, what can you look at today or this week that might help you see yourself more clearly? Or what might you consider not acting out from. Like if we have assertive types, hey, what is it like to sit back and listen that whole meeting and not say a word? What happens inside of you when you don't do that? Do you even know? You know? Or does that thing compel you so much that you cannot listen ever, right? And so this is just this gentle, meant to be. If it ever feels harsh, it was not my intention to be judgy, but really just to go, hey, do you see that you do this? Maybe. And if you do, maybe that can help you to awaken and open up to more of what's possible if you don't do that all the
Mhm.
time, you know?
Yeah, I love that example
Yeah.
you just gave of somebody who talks so much and actually just like sparked a memory for me when I was in my youth pastor job. The one pastor that I ever really looked up to as like a true mentor. I've been on a very crazy deconstruction journey. I would actually love to pick your brain more about that. Maybe we do another episode together or something. I think that'd be really fun because I love this idea of interspiritual that you are talking about because anyway, that's a whole side tangent. I'm very ADHD. So my pastor, I used to, especially as a younger, unaware 19, 20, 21 year old, always had to be the first person in the room to say something. Silence was like not something I was like cool with. So I would just like speak up and I would say something. And I'll never forget it. One day after one of these meetings, this pastor pulled me aside and he was like, "Hey, like, I love what you bring to the table, but you don't always have to be the first person to say something." And to me, I had
Hmm.
never realized that that was something that I did. It was never something I paid attention to. And you know what's crazy? What's crazy about that is that, I had been a leader in the church, a leader in my jobs, all these other things for so long. And the narrative I was told by all of those people was, you're too much, you're too annoying. I had another pastor tell me I was too annoying to ever be in a leadership position. But nobody ever gently pulled me aside and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I love who you are. You don't always have to be the
Oh,
first." And I
so
feel like that is what you are doing when you're describing your book. So I really love that. I love this idea of let's come alongside each other. Let's lovingly help each other. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's lean in. Let's be authentic. But it doesn't have to come from a place of you're too annoying, you're too much, you're too this. It comes from a place of no, you are who you are. And that is beautiful. Let's lean into that while also making ourselves aware of, hey, you don't always have to be the first person in the room to talk.
right, right. That's such a precious story. Wow. Wow, that's so touching. I love that you had that experience and spot on. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And even as you're saying it, I have this like, I want everybody to know like this is the intention behind all of these activations. And if you just open it to some random page and it feels harsh, go back to the first pages, like, and like figure out who I am first, because that is my heart in it. I don't, and here's the other thing. It's a gift. Like for me, it's like the gift of my heart. But did I do the book perfectly? No. Well, some people like feel like, ouch, yes. And then, there might be some back and forth. Oh, was that harsh? Am I judgy still of that type? Like I'm really still exploring that and willing to grow and learn to see the areas like my goal in life. If I have a major goal now, it's like, how do I love more fully? How do I love what I don't yet love?
Are you an
How do
Enneagram
I
too?
no, I'm a 3, but yeah, that's so funny. Yes, a sexual 3.
That makes
Think about
sense.
it. Yeah, I write about it in the book that again, like compassion, talk. I had been already an international Enneagram presenter when I changed my type, when I decided I was wrong.
Oh,
So like I was so wrong. Just now it's like I could just be wrong now because I'm
yes.
done.
3 years hosting an Enneagram podcast and teaching people about the Enneagram, telling them I was a social two. And then I was like, no, you're not a social two, babe. You're a six. Like, let's be honest.
Wow, wow, that's incredible. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I'm with you. And so I do want to say something about this because it feels really important. Because for some people, it might be like, oh, well, the Enneagram is just garbage anyway. Like if you're wrong and you're wrong, da, da, da,
This is an
And I'm
argument I fight all the time.
right. Okay. So I deeply believe that the inquiry itself, the journey of discovering your type is so phenomenal, right? Because it's we're used to the outer gaze. We're looking to the world, right? Versus like looking within for truth and for peace. And I do believe, like for me, the outer persona for me was actually one-ishness. And so I have a lot of one-ishness.
Okay.
I mean, still have that, but realizing that that wasn't the core,
Yeah.
like even of my type, that I had a lot of conditioning around self-sacrifice and doing the right thing. And also, I think the descriptions of threes were a little paltry in explaining the diversity of threeness that is well beyond the white male American
Oh,
three.
loud
I
for the people in the back. Yes.
so right. So that like I couldn't see myself, right? There were things that I had sacrificed. I was like, that doesn't sound like me, that I'm just going with my own success or ambition. And,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, long ago, it was 2002. So it was also before a lot of the nuances and subtypes came out as well when I first typed
Love
myself. No, yeah, yeah. And so there's some pieces around that. And, but I want to fully own that in the end, it was my own. The humor of it is that the three's issue is deceit, right? The emotional habit and self-deceit being the main thing. And so I was like, well then, so I lied to myself. But that self-deceit is almost like I could feel it. It felt like the identity that was my ideal was in me. It didn't feel like it came from someone else. That's how this type emerges, that like the lie to yourself is I actually feel it as within myself. And it was hard to discern and distinguish between, was that a value that was given to me or is that my own? And so only after years of like self-love, it's almost like I had permission to see things that were so icky to me, like I still hate this word, ambition. If anyone uses this word, I'm gonna freak. Like I'm like, I'm not ambitious, like it's just like apparently I am, like
Yeah.
in my own flavor of what that means. I think big. I want big things. That doesn't mean I'm like, I clamor in competitive ways that hurt other people. And I think I equated ambitious and competitive people with that. So I couldn't even own that in myself. So I couldn't name myself as a three for the longest time,
Yeah.
to name these things and also the subtleties of recognizing how it might look based on a cultural,
Okay.
based on female difference, you know? So yeah, yeah. And again, that's why behavior was, like versus like, but
Yeah.
inside, when I could start to really see myself inside, I was like, Nien, you do curate like how you show. Oh, ew. It's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
shoot, you do, but you almost couldn't tell because you do it so fast and so easily. It's like blinking. So it doesn't feel like I don't sit here going, I should change my da 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 for this person. I don't
Right.
have the conscious thought. It's a subtle adjustment
Yeah.
that unconsciously that I just couldn't even see, right? For whether it was because my one-ishness was judging it, so I couldn't see it, and also that the subtlety of what was happening is what I began to notice. And that's how my type emerged for me.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I always talk about my neurospicy journey, and I'm ADHD, and very much when I have the opposite experience of most people, I feel like, because when I was in high school, when I was younger, I did not mask at all. I did not care. I marched to the beat of my own drum. I was very black and white. My parents got divorced when I was 13, and I presented very one-ish. And when I took the test, which is why I always say I don't like the Enneagram test, is maybe 50% accurate because you can't really test for motivation. You can only
Mm,
test for personality traits. But when I took that test, I tested as a one, and I like really identified with that.
mm,
And then I got into college and I started really masking. I had kind of learned that self minimization was the way to make friends. And that's around that time I was told, oh, you are too annoying. Oh, you are too much. So that's when I started typing as a two. And I was like, you know what? Like it almost felt easy for me to be a
mm,
two, because I was like, oh, the fear is like, that people don't want me or they don't love me back. And for me, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then
mm,
I started really doing the work, like I said, and I put together that idea of abandonment versus rejection. And the
mm,
abandonment made me be like, never really identified with six at first because, like, anxiety, like, I am an anxious person. Most of my anxiety does come from needing to know the plan, needing to be prepared, and from my like loyalty and relational. I have a lot of that. But those words, loyalty and abandonment, really started to identify with me. And when we look at those subtypes, social sixes often look like ones and twos and kind of have both of those traits. And so it was really interesting because I went from living life completely unmasked, testing as like a one, living
Yeah.
life very masked, testing as a two. And then when I started to really do the work and dig into like who I actually am, what my story is, I was some of the best and worst personality traits, if you will, of both of those types. But it also allowed me to uncover that real motivation and fear behind it, which is how I kind of figured out that I was actually a type six.
Wow, what a journey. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, yeah. And there's just so much self-awareness I hear, and willingness to kind of dig into it, and be open and open to changing, that piece. Yeah, it is notable. I'll say that there was a part of me when I outed myself that I was like, oh, there are going to be people who are like, they'll never work with her. And at the same time, there were internationally renowned teachers who spoke to me and who were like, what you did was phenomenal. Like to own the truth, because the idea is that there are a lot of Enneagram teachers they're teaching internationally whom people think are wrongly typed, they're like the willingness to scrutinize, to seek truth, and to admit it. It's like that's kind of like all I want for the journey. It's like we can't know for sure, but like that again, it's almost like the intention, the heart to
And
to
that
to
truth is
seek,
the whole point.
yeah.
The whole point. It's how you live a
Yeah.
healed, fulfilled, wonderful,
Mhm.
beautiful life. And wow, I'm just this conversation has been absolutely wonderful. I am so thankful for your time today, Nian. I do want to kind of wrap up with just this last question and then give you the opportunity to share anything you'd like to share about yourself, your work, all of that good stuff. But I think this is a really great way to wrap up our time together. What would you say to someone listening right now who feels lost in their type or disconnected from their spirit?
Well, that might be two different answers. I'd say when you say lost in your type, meaning they're looking for their type in the Enneagram and they just can't like locate it.
Hmm.
Or, yeah, yeah. So I would definitely, kind of what I said earlier, I would maybe set the Enneagram map down for a moment, and maybe work with a guide who, like you, who knows it, but they don't need to be thinking about it. So there's this like permission to have space to just show up as you are. Maybe do some journaling to say, I want, I need, I feel. Like, so you could actually like give permission to know yourself and see if you could just like have that be like the dream list. I feel, I need, like not the what I should feel, not what I should need. And, like that for me, it's like like it illumines things. I'll give an example for myself along my journey that I was judging myself for the fact that I value beauty in my environment. And I happened to be on this silent solo retreat at this gorgeous place that someone gave me permission to have all to myself. I sat there and I was journaling and I wrote as a value beauty. And I could hear in myself, I was like, with the people starving and blah, 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 and like, you're choosing beauty as a value, But it was like, that was something I was owning that was really true about myself. And I felt like something monumental started to happen afterwards. Even like, I write poetry now. I love poetry. There was a part of me that was shut off from that for years,
Wow.
that this is a piece of me that but by owning and naming this thing, it's almost like it unleashed one of is it Wordsworth who says, unleash your imprisoned splendor, like that there was something that is behind that thing that you don't want to admit. And so I don't believe people are ever really like lost. It's just like we don't have permission to see what's here. And
Yeah.
if you give your passion to see what's here, you will find yourself in this moment.
That idea of beauty and those values and storytelling and wellness and girlhood, those aren't separate journeys. They're all threads in that same healing spiral and they all make us who we are. So I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, as we close, Nian, is there anything else you'd like to share with my audience? How can they support you? Where can they get your book?
So evolvingenneagram.com is my website. And my book is available like basically everywhere, Barnes and Noble and Amazon, but if you want to support your local booksellers, just like have them order the book. there. You can find it on my website as well. The big thing that's coming up now, I do lead weekly contemplative Enneagram groups to kind of support people in like having this contemplative way of life. So your soul has room to thrive and shine. I'm launching my first ever contemplative Enneagram practitioner training and certification
Oh my
program.
goodness.
Yes,
Amazing.
because I've reached a point where I'm like, this is how other people are going to get to support. Like, I'm going to tell all my secrets. I've been studying that since 2002, teaching it since 2007. And I'm finally now saying, okay, I want to empower and equip other practitioners.
Oh my gosh.
Other,
So excited for you and for anybody else who's wanting to go on that journey.
yeah. So I'm really excited. And so, yes, all the things, the book, the training, but also a community for doing ongoing opening work to that imprisoned splendor that you are, that each of us is, and it's not a once and done. It's like a way of life, in my view, but hopefully a more compassionate way of life than what we've normally been journeying with. So that's my hope for humankind, if you will. Well, and other than humankind, for the whole world, really. So I do have a big vision. The hope is that this work really helps to bring more love and this idea of everyone and everything belonging, a greater sense of unity, a greater sense of wholeness from the inside out to our whole.
I
So
love that. Thank you so much for being here, Nian, and for sharing. And I'm so excited for you and for your journey and for my audience to connect with you. I really appreciate your time and I hope everyone has a great week. We will see you next time.